Hey guys, it's Bert again. I just wanted to do a quick little comparison of all the Nintendo consoles that have happened in the last 20 or so years. Kind of crazy to believe Nintendo's gone a long way from the original NES home console network to kind of where we are today with the launch of the Switch. So wanted to kind of explain a few of the differences that have happened over time, where we are today, where we were a long time ago, what might be some of your favorite consoles, and maybe even some consoles that you ignored because you weren't really a fan of either the game library or the direction that Nintendo has gone in and maybe continuing to go in, depending on your tastes. So coming up from behind, we have the good old-fashioned N64. So this was out during the PS1. It was kind of their biggest competitor during that time. They decided to stay with the cartridge. And I love this console personally. It's one of my favorite. It's got some of my favorite games that have come from Nintendo from the first-party software. But it was kind of where they decided to kind of focus on first party, and they lost a lot of third parties to Sony. Some of the key things to keep in mind on this is the first time that Nintendo went to the four controllers in the front, and where they really focused on a lot of multiplayer games for 4 players. One of the biggest ones, Mario Kart, GoldenEye, Diddy Kong Racing. You can kind of keep those in mind as kind of where Nintendo 64 was. Then came their big jump that was kind of seen as kind of a positive/negative to a lot of people. People in Japan loved it. Here in the States, we were moving on to the PS2, and the Xbox originally came out at that time. A lot smaller. A lot of people thought this was a lot weaker than the other consoles, and it was to an extent when you compare it to the Xbox. But when you compare it to the PS2, very comparable in power. One of their biggest mistakes during that time was moving to the new discs that were a lot smaller during that time, and they stayed proprietary, and a lot of people lost interest in that, and it was also a lot smaller. So when it came to disc space, a lot of developers had a hard time putting all their game on that one console. Key thing, smaller, you got your little handle, you could take it anywhere you wanted to go. 4-player on the front still. You had 2 options for memory card, really cool. They were kind of small, once again, but they kind of did what they needed to do. The bottom was really neat because you could actually play Game Boy Advance games on here. If you were a handheld gamer, maybe you came from Game Boy. Game Boy Advance had a huge library, and a lot of people still swear by the Game Boy Advance library. So a lot of great stuff from the console. Once again, I loved it. It had a lot of my favorite games. Where Nintendo started to lose me was on the Wii. So even though maybe one of their most successful consoles when it comes to units sold, the library really fell apart, and I actually found the controllers to be very gimmicky. I didn't really care for them, with the exception of your Wii Sports and some of the games that were designed specifically for the controller. But the overall library, not my favorite, but it did have some amazing first-party software. Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, some of the best stuff I've ever played. The Zelda games, fantastic. And here we are today launching the Switch with another Zelda game, so pretty cool. If you got one of the first-gen Wiis, you had your 4-player port. Once again, one of the cool things about this one is that it did have backwards compatibility with the GameCube and also GameCube controllers. If you were one of the people that loves games like Super Smash Bros., you could actually play your GameCube controller, where a lot of people preferred that versus the Wii controller, which, once again, you have your motion controls. They did come out with what they call a Pro controller, or something similar to the Pro controller from the Wii U, but a lot of people preferred the GameCube. You also have the famous Wavebird controller, cordless. Got to keep in mind, back in the day when these were around, you were still dealing with cords until the Wavebird came around with the GameCube. So one of the best controllers of all time, in my opinion. We'll be showing the GameCube controller a little bit more when we do our controller comparisons after console. One of the most misunderstood consoles ever, in my opinion, and unfortunately they launched at the wrong time, and they are dealing with competitors from other companies that are light years ahead when it comes to raw power. But when it comes to first-party games, the Wii U was some of the best stuff I've ever played, and you kind of had to understand their mentality. So you had your controller that you could take and play games and take to another room, and it was kind of the first step into what ended up turning into the Switch, was the next console. So a lot of games you could play on the screen and take it to another room, but there's a lot of first-party software that you can't actually play on here. You have to use this as an enhancement to the controller that you're playing on the screen. So it was kind of a weird concept. The screen quality wasn't the best on this thing, and in many times I found myself using the Pro controller for the Wii U. Again, fantastic library if you like first-party stuff. A lot of the third-party was either missing stuff, missing maybe textures, graphics, but some of the games that came out at the beginning of the 360 and PS3 cycle ended up coming out on the Wii U optimized. So if you can find those, fantastic. They're great games to play. The Arkham, you can actually play some of the Arkham games on here. It's fantastic. Bayonetta 1 and 2 are some of the best stuff I've ever played on here. You will start seeing a lot of software starting to disappear for the Wii U, so if you are a Wii U person, maybe you're on the fence and maybe you want to come to it, grab as much software as you can on the first-party side because it is going to get expensive. I'm already seeing the prices going up on some games that are harder to find already. And I've actually added the PS Vita on here just to kind of compare sizes. So let me kind of remove a couple of these out of the way so we can kind of do some comparisons with the newer consoles. I'll move the Wii out of the way completely to where you can still see it, but the Wii U, and we don't need the console, but mainly this, it's kind of interesting how the sizing of these two is very similar. Obviously, you're going to get a lot bigger of a screen on the Wii U, on the Switch, but the Wii U is not that far off in overall size. Now, I'll do a lot of pictures and show the difference in thickness, but you can really see the difference in thickness between the two of them. They're very different as far as they go, but the overall length of the two is really close. I would say that you have probably an extra inch or so that you can actually see the Wii U controller. Now when it comes to quality, the Switch is a whole nother level. The plastics are fantastic. The screen obviously is amazing when you take a look at it with games. The Wii U, another story. It feels very plasticky. It's light for how big it is, so it gives a cheap feeling to things. But it's actually a great controller. I didn't mind it when I was playing multiplayer, and it's got a lot of great things to it. As I mentioned, I have the Vita here just to kind of give an idea of where we are in sizes. So when you're looking at the Switch screen, the Vita almost fits inside of the actual Switch screen. If you look on the sides here, you can actually see the Joy-Cons actually protruding from both sides to where you can see how big the screen is. So Vita, a lot smaller of a screen. One of my favorite handhelds. I do like a lot of the library. However, I do agree with the library being kind of thin. So you have to kind of deal with Vita games that are designed for the Vita and not games that are trying to be a console game on a handheld. They just don't work that well. So once again, you're dealing with sizes. You have the Vita, it fits inside of the Switch. You have the Switch and the Wii U almost identical in size of device. However, the screen size is another story. The Switch is actually very similar in screen sizes, but the thinness is something else. So you're looking at pretty good hardware from Nintendo continuing to happen with the Wii U, and with the Switch being around, very cool concept. Love it so far. I just hope the library continues with where it should go. I'm going to be having some up-close and detailed pictures to show the difference in sizes. So compared to the Switch, and the next video we're going to be shooting later today is the controller comparisons on where we are and where we used to be with controls and how good the new Pro controller is. So we'll be debuting an unboxing of this bad boy coming up a little bit later today, and then we'll compare it to other controllers. So join us again next time, and have a good one.